Hello, readers. So I guess we can call this a sort of experiment, but I'm starting to serialize the Sackville Hotel trilogy. And so today I'm recording the first episode, which is from the first book, The Blue Pendant. So there is the book, and I will be starting out with Chapter 1. Chapter 1. 1913. The Sackville Hotel. 19-year-old Anna Neale stepped cautiously out of the ladies-only carriage onto platform 4 of the Bexhill-on-Sea train station. Scarcely able to take a breath, she seized her moment of freedom, anticipating the adventures that were sure to follow. Her fingers nervously twisted the black ribbon at her neck and felt the coolness of its blue crystal pendant. Uncle Bertie's gift from India. His words echoed in her head. Anna, follow your dreams and never let anyone destroy them. Bexhill-on-Sea may be oceans away from India, but this was Anna's first adventure. Happiness percolated through her veins, and a grin the Cheshire Cat would be proud of spread from ear to ear as she walked distractedly along the platform. Startled by a blast of steam from the locomotive, she inhaled sharply, only to relax with the engine as it hissed its final breath, resting at the end of a long journey, and Anna at the beginning of her own journey. As the first-class passengers alighted, the platform buzzed with porters loading trunks and baggage onto carts, ladies huffing with displeasure, and their husbands stiff and strained, barely able to maintain their decorum. Nanny's frustrated voices could be heard trying to elicit good behaviour from children as excited as Anna. She gave a knowing smile to a little boy in a sailor suit and wished she could join him as he skipped up and down the platform. Intoxicated by the crowd, Anna watched families gather their belongings, fathers protecting and mothers fussing. A twinge of loneliness jabbed at her heart. "Ouch!" she cried out as something sharp poked her arm. "Sorry, miss," said the boy in the sailor suit, clutching a shiny wooden boat, anxiety creasing his young face. Anna smiled to reassure him she wasn't going to chastise. The gentleman, the boy's father, doffed his hat to Anna and pulled the boy away. Sadly, Anna thought the boy would be chastised. Loud squawks followed by several ear-piercing yaps made Anna turn her head looking for the offenders. A red-faced porter, his little round cap askew, was pushing an overloaded cart in her direction. Precariously balanced on the top of a stack of trunks and bags was a birdcage, its gold satin cover having slipped to one side, revealing the source of the squawking, a loud, distressed parrot. The yapping appeared to be coming from a grand, voluptuous lady who, in competition with the yapping, barked orders at the porter. Anna recoiled at the sight of such an imposing figure of a woman. Long black feathers sprang like tentacles seeking prey from an enormous black hat. Her black dress rustled with each determined step as she marched towards Anna. Two little jet eyes revealed the source of the yapping. A Pekingese snuggled protectively against an ample bosom. The yapping ceased. She averted her eyes, catching a steely look of disdain from under the hat. Anna felt decidedly Lilliputian. A gruff voice called, "Miss Neale? Miss Anna Neale?" "Yes, I'm Anna Neale." A small man appeared from the crowd. "Name's Carter, miss. Mr. Pickles sent me from the Sackville Hotel. This your trunk?" Anna nodded. Carter lifted the trunk onto his shoulder as though it was a sack of potatoes. His strength belied his short stature and greying hair. "Follow me, miss. I hope you don't mind a bit of a walk. I had to park the buggy on the next street." Anna nodded, but in truth she had trouble keeping pace and winced as her new boots pinched her little toe. Turning the corner onto the next street, the wind caught her hat. She grabbed it in mid-air, catching her fingers in the pale blue band, crushing the delicate pale and blue flowers along the brim. She was annoyed that her long golden brown curls, wayward at the best of times, had loosened from their pins and would, she thought, resemble a bird's nest. But better that than having her prized hat rolling down the dirty street. It had taken a great deal of whining and tears to persuade Papa that Mamma would indeed take her to Mrs. Morton's millinery shop, an extravagance he could ill afford. "Here we are," Carter said, dropping the trunk in the back of the buggy. The horse lifted its head and whinnied. Carter skillfully manoeuvred the buggy between horses, landaus, and automobiles as he pulled into the street. "Busy time," Carter said as he yanked the reins tight to avoid a carriage. "It'll be like this all summer. Comings and goings. Some stay here all season. Bit early, June. It'll get frantic in late July and August. Mr. Pickles says it's going to be a good summer. Hotel's already booked up." The buggy leaned to the right, rounding the corner onto the promenade, only inches from the shingle beach. "Oh, the sea! And oh, how it sparkles like millions of dancing stars!" Carter slowed the buggy to a stop. "Your first time at the seaside?" Anna nodded, feeling the warm sun on her face and staring up at the bright blue sky. Carter lifted the reins and the horse moved forward, and immediately in front of them stood the Sackville Hotel. "It's so big, and those towers, it looks like a castle." Overwhelmed by the size and grandeur of the hotel, Anna felt the euphoria slip away and the excited internal butterflies turned to anxiety. Her sister Lou's sarcastic words filled her head. "Maid's work not good enough for our Anna. What are you going to do when Papa isn't there to rescue you?" Lou had been right, even if her remarks were made out of jealousy. How was she going to manage? The youngest of three siblings, father's favourite and somewhat spoiled, Anna had learned to manipulate events and people to suit her fancy. Carter looked sympathetic. "First time away from home?" Anna didn't answer, embarrassed to have shown her vulnerability. "Self-pity will get me nowhere," she thought. "I must be strong." She sat up straighter and lifted her chin a little higher, fluffing the flowers of her midnight blue hat before attaching it firmly to her head with a long hat pin. "Whoa!" Carter pulled the horse to a stop. "This is the back door," Anna said. Carter looked puzzled. "Yes, we staff, and staff goes in the service door. It's more than me job's worth if Mr. Pickles catches us at the front." "But I'm the front desk clerk, not a maid." Just the word mention of maid gripped her with fear. Once was enough. "Well, aren't we hoity-toity?" About to pout, Anna reminded herself that whether she liked it or not, she was an employee. Loosening her pursed lips, she smiled. "Sorry, Carter. I'm rather nervous." "No matter, lass. Course you are. But nobody bites. There's a nice bunch on the whole. Mrs. Banks, she's head housekeeper. Can be a bit strict, but that's her job. And Mr. Pickles, he's the hotel manager, runs a tight ship. He used to be a ship's captain. They's fair, at least Mrs. Banks is. Mr. Pickles has some strange ways about him." Carter lowered his voice and hesitated. "Mr. Pickles, well, he's, can be difficult." Then he returned to his cheery self. "Mrs. Banks is always fair and kind, too. My uncle met Mr. Pickles on one of his trips to India, Anna said, feeling comfortable with Carter's friendliness. That's how I knew about the position of front desk clerk. Anna, don't go bragging about your uncle knowing Mr. Pickles to the others. They's a good bunch, but they don't like favoritism, and they can be mean if you get above your station. Carter's change in tone, kind but firm, perplexed her. She was proud of her uncle's association with Mr. Pickles, and her position was superior. She mused. Was that bragging? She had the feeling Carter was giving her a warning. Entering through the back door, Carter led her through a warren of passages. Anna felt akin to Alice in Wonderland. The hot, damp smell of wet linen mixed with soap and carbolic filled the hallway, followed by an unexpected hint of lavender and rosewater wafting from an open door. Steam swirled round a young maid as she ironed. Anna gave a shudder, a memory better forgotten. The quietness and the lack of people felt odd, as if Carter had anticipated her inquiry. He said, "It's tea time. They's in the staff dining room." The laundry smell faded, and pleasant aromas of roasting meat, onions, and some kind of baking filled Anna's nostrils, making her aware that she hadn't eaten since an early breakfast. Approaching a door opposite the kitchen, she heard a man's harsh voice and felt herself recoil as Carter opened the door. The voice stopped mid-sentence, and all heads turned to look at Anna. Stricken by reality, she wanted to run, but her feet were glued to the floor. It was impossible to move either way. An enormous wooden table surrounded by dozens of chairs, most of them occupied, filled the room. A china cup being placed on its saucer broke the silence, and someone reached for a slice of cake. Carter spoke first. "This is Miss Anna Neale, our new clerk." The owner of the harsh voice, a tall, older gentleman with pointed features, shifty eyes, and thin grey hair, immaculately dressed in black tails, striped waistcoat and white shirt, stood at the head of the table. "Welcome to the Sackville, Miss Neale. I'm Mr. Pickles, General Manager. Once you are settled, you will be reporting to me in the front office." The silence in the room drummed in her ears as she forced a reply. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Pickles." She bobbed a curtsy. Hearing a maid giggle, she blushed, deducing the curtsy was inappropriate. Mr. Pickles' icy glare sent ripples down her back. Then he introduced Mrs. Banks, nodded dismissively to the staff, and left the room. Mrs. Banks had the look of a cross schoolteacher, but the crossness softened in her brown eyes. Her grey-brown hair, pulled into a too-tight chignon, gave her face a surprised look. She wore a neat brown dress trimmed with a white lace collar, and a large ring of keys jangled at her waist. "You must be tired after your long journey. Come, sit." She pointed to the chair next to her. "Miss Romano, please pour Miss Neale a cup of tea while I introduce you all." Anna declined to sit. Instead of feeling proud in her posh new travelling suit, she felt self-conscious and quite aware of the inappropriateness of her attire in the staff dining hall. The brim of her hat, too wide to fit between the chairs, would likely poke Mrs. Banks or Miss Romano in the face. "Miss Sophie Romano is our senior housemaid, and you will be sharing a room with her." Obviously, Mrs. Banks considered sharing with Miss Romano, the senior maid, to be a privilege, but Miss Romano did not appear to agree. Her eyes bored into Anna with contempt. Anna, who had been expecting her own room, considered the contempt to be mutual. Starting with the scullery maid, Mrs. Banks introduced the staff. Anna nodded at each introduction. The names and positions were becoming muddled, and she was feeling light-headed. Chambermaids, scullery maids, laundresses, kitchen maids, as well as porters, cooks, and kitchen staff, even a stable hand. Mrs. Banks' words merged together. Her mouth moved in slow motion. Muffled sounds surrounded Anna. She felt the blood ebbing from her head. Mrs. Banks' arms guided her into the chair, pushing her head towards her knees. "Miss Neale, keep your head down." A sharp pain shot into Anna's head. Her hat caught on the table and pushed the hat-pin into her scalp. Mortified, this was not the first impression she had intended. "How long is it since you ate?" Mrs. Banks asked. "I had breakfast before I left home." Anna kept her head down, unable to face the inquisitive stares. "Silly child, no wonder you're faint." Mrs. Banks stirred 2 spoons of sugar into the tea. "Miss Neale, sit up slowly and sip some of this tea." Anna raised her head, trying to smile. "I must look a sight." Embarrassed, colour flooded into her pale face. She pulled the long pins from the hat and took the hat off, handing it to Mrs. Banks, who gave her an admiring browse before placing it on the Welsh dresser. A nice-looking young gentleman with blondish hair and haunting aqua-blue eyes, wearing a white chef's coat, handed her a piece of cake. "The best Victoria sponge you'll ever have tasted this side of London," he said, with a friendly smile. "I made it myself this morning." "Thank you." Anna looked up, frantically trying to recall his name. "Name's Bill Blaine. I'm the under-chef, Chef Louis' assistant. Don't worry about names. You'll soon get to know everyone." Teacups clinked. The chatter and laughter resumed until the grandfather clock chimed the half-hour. Everyone except Miss Romano and Mrs. Banks scurried back to their duties. Mrs. Banks finished her tea while anxiously studying Anna. Anna wondered whether her anxiety was due to her undignified fainting fit or concern for her ability to fill her duties and get along with the staff. The latter caused an unpleasant memory flash of a spiteful maid at Lady Chartwell's, her previous employer. "Are you feeling better, Miss Neale?" Mrs. Banks said with a stern expression that unexpected kindness. "Are you feeling better, Miss Neale?" Mrs. Banks said with a stern expression, but unexpected kindness in her voice. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Banks. The journey was perhaps more taxing than I thought." "Miss Romano will take you to your room. You still look a little pale. I suggest you rest for a while. High tea for those staff members who are free is served at 6. The rest eat when their duties allow. You will join me in my sitting room after tea and I will explain the rules. Tomorrow morning you will report to Mr. Pickles at 8 o'clock for a list of your duties." Miss Romano led the way down a short passageway, pointing to a sign that read "Head Housekeeper." "That's Mrs. Banks' sitting room, and where she sometimes takes her meals, but she usually dines in the staff dining room. I think she likes to keep tabs on us. Her bedroom is upstairs in the staff quarters. Down here," Miss Romano pointed towards the end of the corridor, "is Mr. Pickles' suite, his study where he always dines alone, and his bedroom. He lives in during the week and goes home to his wife on Saturday and Sunday. The door next to it, the green baize door, is the staff entrance for the lobby, Mr. Pickles' office and the front desk. In case you are wondering, the baize door is soundproof, so the guests don't hear the staff." "I know what a baize door is," Anne retorted, sensing a pout on her lips and quickly reminding herself of her position. "Oh, you've worked in service, have you?" Anna regretted her impulsive response. "The work didn't suit me, and I left to go to secretarial school." Miss Romano rolled her eyes. "You are lucky you had a choice. Don't be lording over me. I'm the head maid and I work hard." Miss Romano ran up the 4 flights of stairs and stood on the top landing watching Anna struggle, puffing heavily and limping from the pain of her toe. "You'll get used to the climb. That's Mrs. Banks' bedroom." She indicated a door in the centre of the landing, which divided the long, grey, dreary hallway, lined with doors all painted the same dull sage green. Pointing to her left, she said, "Those are the men's quarters." Turning to the right, Miss Romano continued, "Here's the women's hall, and no men allowed. If you are caught breaking the rules, dismissal without reference is immediate." Miss Romano walked to the end of the hall and flung a door open. This is my room. At least it was until you came here." Ignoring the comment and struggling to hold her tongue, Anna followed her into a small attic room. Steeply sloping ceilings with barely enough room to stand, except in the centre, made the room seem claustrophobic. A dormer window separated two beds, each with a chest of drawers at the foot. A wooden table and chair nestled underneath the window. Next to the door, on the only flat wall, a round mirror hung above a washstand with basin and jug. Miss Romano opened a small door in the slanting wall, more roof than wall. "You can hang things in there. It's quite big inside. I use it as a wardrobe, so make sure you push your stuff to the back." Miss Romano pointed to the bed at the right. "That's my bed and chest of drawers, and don't touch my stuff." She wagged her finger at Anna. "I must go and make up some guest rooms before dinner." She spun on her heels and flounced out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Anna cringed, listening to Miss Romano's feet pound on the wooden floor. Anna looked around the tiny room. The beds were old-fashioned ironstead beds and brown horsehair blankets and clean, crisp white sheets. The floorboards were bare except for a small rug by Miss Romano's bed. The bed springs creaked and squeaked as she gingerly lay down. Stretching out on the lumpy mattress, she closed her eyes. A rap on the door startled her. "It's Carter, miss. I have your trunk." Carter placed her trunk just inside the door and left. His swift departure left her feeling abandoned. Feelings of loneliness and disappointment were foreign to Anna, and she found the unknown alarming. Mrs. Banks showed kindness when she had fainted, but the pursed lips and the tight chignon gave the opposite impression. Anna chuckled. Perhaps her stays were pulled too tight. She didn't trust or like Sophie Romano, and the feeling seemed mutual. Just her luck, she thought, to be sharing a room with someone worse than her sister Lou. And why didn't she have her own room? She deserved better. She would write to Papa and he would arrange for her to have her own room. As much as Anna complained about Lou's annoying and bossy ways, she did love her. Anna and her soulmate brother Charlie daydreamed of sailing to faraway countries like Uncle Bertie did. But Father didn't approve of Uncle Bertie. He considered him an irresponsible wanderer, a womanizer, and a general bad influence. Mama adored her younger brother, so Papa tolerated him. Quite the opposite of Uncle Bertie, Papa was a precise man, an accountant by profession. Thinking of the family prompted tears, leaving wet spots on the ruffle of her white blouse. She was already having misgivings about her much-anticipated adventure. It had not occurred to Anna, although when she thought about it, it should have been obvious, that a large hotel would require a large complement of staff. It had certainly never occurred to her that the hierarchy and duties of hotel staff were similar to that of servants in a large household. She swallowed the lump in her throat, afraid that the Sackville might open up some deep scars of injustice. The memories of the last year came flooding back. She just turned 18 when Mama announced that Thomas Telford, a weedy-looking farmer's son who would inherit his father's land, had asked Papa for Anna's hand in marriage. Anna overheard a mother say, "Taking a husband will cure our daughter's fanciful ideas of adventure." Anna was hurt and angry. She'd always thought that her mother supported her yearnings to travel and her desire for independence. Not only did Anna have no affection for Mr. Telford, she had no interest in marrying anyone. The thought of running a household and having babies made her feel quite ill. Anna adamantly refused Thomas Telford. Mama and Papa were insistent that if she didn't marry, she must find something useful to do, always adding, "until you do marry," which Anna had decided long ago was not going to happen. What could she do? Having never applied herself at school, becoming a teacher or governess was out of the question. Papa didn't approve of shop girls. He thought they were flighty. The obvious option open to her was service. To Anna, being a maid in service was almost as bad as marriage, but no amount of pleading would change Papa's mind. Anna was engaged by Lady Chartwell to assist her lady's maid Dorothea. She thought this might be interesting. Lady Chartwell was a miserable, grouchy old lady who treated Dorothea unkindly, but for some inexplicable reason she treated Anna well, which did not endear her to Dorothea or the rest of the servants. Quite oblivious to the spiteful ways of servants, Anna's innocence led her down a dangerous path as imagination took her into an exciting dream world. A window to another life, she naively thought of travel and adventure. Perhaps it was the constant praise that fueled Anna's ego, and by her own admittance, she enjoyed serving Lady Chartwell. However, she did not foresee how the praise would inspire hatred in Dorothea. Fearing for her position, Dorothea plotted to get rid of Anna. While Anna was sponging and ironing one of Lady Chartwell's finest evening gowns, the kitchen maid conveniently called her away. Upon her return, to her horror, Anna found the hot iron burning a hole in the gown. As much as she claimed her innocence, she was dismissed in disgrace. Dorothea had burnt the gown, but denied it, and Anna couldn't prove she had never been in the laundry, let alone touched the gown. Her confidence shattered, Anna had been miserable. It hurt to think that Lou and Mamma were sceptical, although they both had an awareness of the spiteful things that go on below stairs. Papa considered it to be a domestic matter and no concern of his. Anna moped around the house, afraid to do anything. It was Papa who came to her rescue and suggested she try her hand at typewriting. Anna enrolled in Mrs. Wordsworth's secretarial school for young ladies. Anna relived the sense of pride and satisfaction she had felt when she soared to the top of her class, typing 65 words a minute. Pitman shorthand came to her easily. Her confidence returned, and once again dreams of freedom filled her head. Her latest interest in reading books and newspapers prompted her to question the role of women. She was intrigued by the success and notoriety of Florence Nightingale's nursing achievements during the Crimea War, and more recently by Emmeline Pankhurst, the leader of the British suffragette movement, and her fight for women. Although neither nursing and war nor prison, Emmeline was often arrested, appealed to her. The strength and independence of these women was a great motivator to Anna. She affectionately remembered how she had persuaded dear Uncle Bertie to find her a secretarial position that would take her away from anything domestic. She grimaced, recalling the loud voices coming from Papa's study, as Uncle Bertie had persuaded him that the Sackville was a prestigious hotel and Anna would be suitably chaperoned. Papa finally gave his permission, albeit reluctantly. Mamma had reprimanded her for the unbecoming behaviour, as she laughed and giggled and floated off into daydreams. She couldn't help herself. The prospect of leaving home and working in the big hotel was exciting adventure indeed. But now she was here, standing in this tiny attic bedroom. The excitement had waned. Her palms were wet with perspiration, her throat constricted, and tears rolled slowly on her face, her confidence slipping away with the receding tide of Bexhill-on-Sea. And that brings chapter 1 to the conclusion, and please stay tuned for chapter 2.